Hello and welcome. I am Matt Roddy, and this is the Greater Prescott Podcast, where we talk about, you guessed it, all things Greater Prescott. Today, I want to welcome my guest, Michael Byrd, the Executive Director of Prescott Creeks. Michael, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
We are literally in your backyard.
We are in the project, Watson Woods Riparian Preserve.
Which is, we will get to that as we get into the conversation,
Sure.
But I love being mobile and getting to set up, frankly, wherever we can get the gear to. Okay. So, yeah, we're in Watson Woods, and I was here with Eric Moore as well.
Right.
And what a beautiful spot.
You can't beat it.
You really can't. You really can't. So today, you guys are going to get to learn about Michael's background, what brought him to Prescott. You're going to get to learn about Prescott Creeks and the role that they played, not just in this physical location, but around the greater Prescott area. So I know I'm excited to learn about it. And that's one of the fun parts for me is I can do some homework for sure on a website and things like that.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, sitting across from the person who that's their passion, I just get to learn so much. And when other people get to listen and watch this, they're going to do the same.
Well, I hope so.
So to kick it off, let's talk about where were you born and raised, what'd you do when you were a kid, and we're just going to work our way through to now.
I'm a Midwest kid. I grew up in Ohio, born and raised there, spent almost half my life in Ohio. And, I was in suburbia. And so, in a lot of ways, nature was kind of right there in our backyard, but nature was very manicured.
Yeah.
And, the edges were, this was the grass and that's the garden. And, the little flowers are just so far apart. But, there were squirrels and birds. And I remember finding a turtle in the backyard when you're little. And so I think, those are great formative experiences.
They are.
But this kind of nature, I think that was a place that we went to.
Okay.
We would go down to the river park, or we would go down to the church had a camp about an hour's drive away. That was the real woods.
Yeah.
With, hills and that sort of thing. So, yeah, Midwest kid.
Okay.
Grew up in the suburbs.
Did you spend a lot of your time outside?
I think I spent a fair amount of time outside. In the particular city I lived in, we were kind of at that point in the 70s.
Okay.
We were the test market for America.
Gotcha.
So we got all kinds of products before the rest of the world.
So when you say suburbia, you were the beginning.
And the kicker was we got cable TV in 1977.
Wow.
And so unfortunately, a lot of my youth was staring at that box.
Yeah.
And so, I still got outside and did kid things, rode my bike and, ran around, caused trouble. But, there was a lot of TV in my youth.
Yeah. Interesting, because now this, in a sense, is the new TV, and you and I both have kids, and so that's a whole nother conversation, but a very intriguing one, if you ask me.
Yeah, the world is changing in dramatic ways, and the way that we consume media and get information gets... I grew up when the phone rang, you would knock over little old ladies and children because it might be important. And now we turn off our phones.
Yeah, no kidding.
It was interesting.
Yeah.
But, I went through a period where TV was very much a part of my reality.
Makes sense.
And then it stopped being a part of my reality at all. And this part of the world became... sort of took that place.
Yeah. Talk about this part of the world. So you're growing up in Ohio. It was at some point in time for you to quit high school or leave high school, and what was the next step?
Yeah. So, went through high school, kind of wrapped up that portion and just went straight to college.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, I picked Ohio State. I think because it was there and familiar and convenient. I wasn't a particularly motivated student, I'll have to say. And spent a couple of years at Ohio State just kind of spinning my wheels, getting all that freshman prerequisite stuff out of the way. And hit a wall and said, this doesn't work. And so I went out and got a landscaping job. And that was my world for about 2 years.
So real quick, I have an agribusiness degree
Okay.
from ASU with an emphasis in golf facility management. So I worked on a lot of golf courses and commercial landscaping. I looking back, I should have just gone and worked at a golf course, not gone to college. But that's it. But yeah, that's kind of what a little bit about what college taught me. Like, hey, I could just get outside and learn these things, and
Absolutely.
that works for me.
There are multiple pathways.
There are.
And, I think the trick is, in hindsight, as I look at that time that I was spinning my wheels, well, there was learning happening. And
Always is.
I wasn't fully appreciating it and seeing where it was going to take me at that point.
Yeah.
But, to this day, I still, when I see mowed grass, I'm looking at the lines and the pattern. And
Me too. Well, I love golf. Haven't played for years because I've got a bunch of kids, don't have time. Augusta National is the golf course, right? And every homeowner and every golf course player thinks that their golf course and their lawn should look like Augusta.
Exactly.
And if you know anything about it, it's on steroids. They're in a league that you can't even fathom, actually. And so it's just kind of funny. That's not how it works in the real world.
Well, and I think, that's one of the things I've learned doing this work is before we sat down, I mentioned that we had planted a lot of these trees. And, I think with a golf course, you want people to look at those lines and see how beautiful the turf looks.
Absolutely.
And it's kind of the exact opposite here.
Oh, good point.
Or at least from my perspective, is I really hope that people will come walking through here and not realize that humans have had a hand in, making these trees where they are, and getting the birds sitting on the branches in their particular locations, that kind of thing. So, it's we all have our own paths, and I think that landscaping job for a couple of years, I got enough of a taste of that I knew that my back wasn't going to hold out forever, and that's not necessarily really where my core essence was.
Yeah.
And I think it kind of led me this direction to, a little more nature focused.
So then what happened after work? You do a couple years landscaping, and then...
So I went back to Ohio State thinking I was going to be a forester.
Okay.
I thought that's what I was going to do is learn how to grow forests.
Yeah.
And got into my major program, which was natural resources, and pretty quickly figured out that Ohio State was not the place for me.
Okay.
It was just humongous school. I think
it's one of the biggest.
Yeah, the school population was like as big as Prescott is.
Exactly.
Maybe bigger.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I kind of started looking for something different.
Okay.
And I didn't know what that was. And long story short, I found Prescott College.
Okay.
And I read their brochure, which back in those days was not lots of pictures. It was lots of descriptions of field courses, and my brain about exploded that was a real thing. I was like, what? So I ended up coming out here and spent a couple of years and ended up graduating from Prescott College.
Yeah.
I think the fun part of the story is at Prescott College, I don't know if you know, but it's a very experiential learning type of environment.
Okay.
So at Prescott College, you don't, compared to Ohio State, they handed me a piece of paper that said, take all these classes and you get a degree in such and such. At Prescott College, you kind of have to build that list yourself.
Yeah.
And so it's very self-directed in that way. And then as a senior student, you have to do a senior project that demonstrates your competence in your chosen area of study. And so those take all kinds of different forms.
Oh, I bet.
And for me, shortly before I graduated, I met the folks who had just established Watson Woods Riparian Preserve.
Okay.
And so writing the first management plan for this
No
land
kidding.
was my senior project.
Oh my goodness.
So technically, all these years later, I'm still working on my senior project.
Yeah. You're a lifelong learner, Michael.
Evidently.
Did they give you a degree at least?
I have a degree.
Okay. Phew. They're not holding it out to see if...
No, I completed what we said we would do.
Good.
But, you know, it was one thing led to another, and here I am all these years later.
Yeah. I think some people, some of my guests, after the fact, they go, I didn't really know why we started where was I born and raised. I think you were kind of crazy asking me those questions, but I ask them because it really helps paint the picture and pave the way and really illuminate why you're sitting here. Those formative years early on are important.
Absolutely.
They were for me. They've been for everyone who sits across the table, and I think that's special. So I always like that to come across.
Yeah, it's fun kind of knowing people's stories because there are all these twists and turns. But
so many.
if you dig back, and I made that connection years ago. I had to write my first bio. I think it was when we put up our website. And I was thinking about how did I get here from there? Because it seems like I remember when I first moved to Prescott. The summer before I moved here, I spent as a wilderness ranger in Virginia.
Ooh.
And I went out in the forest here, and it just felt like I was on a different planet.
Okay.
Just very different ecosystems.
Yeah.
But I thought about when I was a kid, there was this park that we went to, and there was, you know, a little wet ditch that we would play in the water. And this ditch emerged from this concrete pipe. You know, and upstream from that, who knew? But I've since come to learn that is a creek. And it's called Turkey Run.
Okay.
And so I lived in the Turkey Run watershed.
Well,
You know, who knew?
yeah.
But
I love it.
You know, it was like we'd go there for picnics and that sort of thing. And when it was time to go, they were always dragging me away.
Yeah.
And I was all muddy.
Of
and
course. That's the best.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So now I get paid to do that.
Yeah, no kidding. You're cleaner now.
Try to.
A little bit.
Yeah.
So you come to Prescott College, you graduate. What do you do?
So it was interesting.
And what was your degree?
So my degree was, environmental conservation with an emphasis on resource management.
Okay.
So I tried to take all that time I had at Prescott College or at Ohio State and fit it into my Prescott College world.
Yep.
But you know, a resource manager is what I refer to myself as. I'm not a scientist.
Currently, that's kind of how you would, for the layman's term.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just, you know, if we're looking for a soundbite, you know, what do? Resource management.
Okay.
And you know, I think I'm very much a generalist. I have to be able to communicate scientific information to the public, but I also have to work with the scientists.
Yeah.
So I have a foot in kind of all these different camps.
Interesting.
And as a small organization, you know, I have to be jack of all trades with making the copier work and creating brochures on the computer and all that fun stuff.
A generalist.
Yeah, very much.
So did you start working for Prescott Creeks right out of college?
So funny story is I remember my sister, who was 3 years older than me, she graduated from college and had no job lined up.
Okay.
And she moved back in with my parents, you know, and as a senior in high school or recent graduate, I was like, no way.
Yeah.
That is not happening in my world. And it was a couple of months before graduation over here at Prescott College, and I realized, oh no,
Is that me?
I don't have something lined up. And ultimately, the Prescott Creeks Preservation Association, they had just secured a grant to write that first management plan.
Okay.
And so I had kind of a contract position with Prescott Creeks working on that plan.
Is that somewhat of the plan that you helped write?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Wow.
it was really the senior project was we didn't actually do a lot of hands-on work on actually writing the plan. It was a lot of advanced legwork, figuring out how it should be.
Yeah.
And the reason for that was we had grant funding from the state of Arizona, the Arizona Water Protection Fund.
Okay.
I want to say it was like $30,000 back in 1996.
Yeah.
So big money.
Yeah.
And you know, contracting, red tape, all that stuff just didn't come together while I was doing my actual project. So, you know, I was kind of queuing it up, doing a lot of work that when we got there made it all happen.
Okay.
And so we could kind of move a little bit further down the road.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right. So you start that contract position.
Yeah. And that was, I don't know, we probably worked on that for about a year, give or take. We had a team of folks who, we each kind of took on different pieces of it and then worked collaboratively, brought things together, and ended up with this, fat document that I think we gave it a 5-year life, and it had a very long list of projects in it. And it stayed alive for about 10 years.
I was going to say, 5 years is nothing.
And, at that point we said, okay, we've largely done what is called for here. Time to write a new plan.
What's next?
And work out the, what else do we need to do?
Okay. So you have been with the organization since mostly out of college?
Pretty much, yeah.
Wow.
So, 24-ish years.
Wow.
Something like that. Yeah, so I've seen a lot of change.
You have seen a lot of change.
Some of it good, some of it not so good.
Of course, of course.
But the only constant is change, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So then let's segue. Tell the viewers what Prescott Creeks is, and kind of give the layman's terms or explanation, and then we'll dig a little deeper and start going.
Yeah, absolutely. So Prescott Creeks is a not-for-profit organization. We were founded in 1990, and our current mission statement is to achieve healthy watersheds and clean waters in central Arizona. We do that for people and for wildlife.
Okay.
And then we do that through a variety of different efforts: protection, preservation, restoration. We do a lot of education, working with the public, trying to get folks understanding what these areas are.
Yeah.
And then there's some advocacy in there as well, working with our local governments, trying to, I really view our advocacy kind of through an education lens.
Yeah.
But just really trying to move decisions in right ways, if you will, or long-term sustainable types of ways.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's, in a nutshell, what you do.
That's kind of the soundbite.
Yeah. Keep going. I guess let's peel the onion back more.
Sure.
A lot of words in there.
Sure.
I kind of know what they are, but not really, and how all this interacts. So, how would you keep explaining it?
It's interesting. So watershed was one of the words that I use, and that's kind of one of those 50-cent or maybe they're $5 words now. But, I first knew the term watershed because there was a band called Watershed at college, And I was like, wow, that sounds cool. What is that?
Yeah.
And I looked it up and I was like, oh, and now I understand what watershed is. So let's see a show of hands. Who knows what watershed means?
I couldn't explain it.
Is it a swampy area that holds water? Is it a small building where we store our water?
An area that gets water away from another area?
Yeah, kind of. So, I'm not going to be able to do the dictionary definition, but if you think about, it's an area of land that all drains to a common water body.
Okay.
So here, we are, where Prescott is, we are in the Granite Creek watershed.
Okay. It's as a whole.
And that's Granite Creek right there.
No kidding.
Yeah. So, here's not a great spot. We can't see the watershed boundaries, but, if you get kind of up into the forest and you kind of look around you, you can see there are hillsides that, if you draw a line between all of them, if a raindrop hits that line, it's going to go to one side or the other side. And if it comes our direction, it's ultimately going to end up, if that water drop didn't get intercepted by trees or evaporation or those sorts of things, it'll end up in Granite Creek.
That's fascinating.
And so here's the really cool part, is Granite Creek and all of the Granite Creek watershed is part of the Byrd River watershed. So it goes down and it joins a bigger system.
Yeah.
And so the Byrd River watershed is part of the Gila River watershed.
Okay.
And the Gila is part of the Colorado, and so we are part of the Colorado River watershed. So it's sort of like the nesting dolls.
Absolutely.
We didn't get it quite right, did we? But yeah, so watersheds are kind of this great way to think about our landscape that are independent of the lines that humans have arbitrarily drawn
Yeah.
for political boundaries or roadways. A lot of
Yeah.
times when we think about how we relate to the landscape, it's like, oh, well, I take Highway 89 and then I turn
Mm-hmm.
on. And so this is kind of using rivers.
Yep.
And there was a guy named John Wesley Powell
Okay.
who was the first Westerner to explore the Colorado River.
Okay.
He had been in the Civil War, and he went on to
Wow.
found the U.S. Geological Survey,
Oh.
a government agency
Yep.
that we have now. So he actually, in the, I think it was the 1860s, early 1870s, he advocated that when we think about the political divisions in the West, that we base them on watershed boundaries, not this 60 acres or 160 acres and
Yeah.
a mule thing.
Yeah.
Because he knew
In his-
that's not going to work. It's too
Yeah.
dry out there.
Admit that.
Yeah, they didn't pay
Okay.
attention to him, and so we have all these funky straight lines that, don't have anything to do with water or watersheds.
See, little snippets like that, you just, that's really fascinating.
I
That
love.
really is that someone, although it didn't actually pan out, had the foresight to go, hey guys, this is probably a better way to do it. And in just one sentence, that makes so much sense.
It really does. And, 150 years later, we are still grappling with these sorts of things. Prescott has had water issues since Prescott was here.
Yep.
And, intermittently there's been squabbling with the neighboring communities.
Mhm.
I think presently everybody's, cooperating and collaborating
Okay.
because that's the right way to do it.
Yeah.
But, just as the West, we're struggling with that.
Yeah.
Colorado River compacts and different states trying to coordinate, and
Yeah.
we've got things like Lake Powell and Lake Mead that
Yep.
are not nearly as full as a lot of people would like them to be.
Yeah.
Yep. And yeah, so
Okay.
Prescott Creeks is not really in the water supply business. We don't
That makes
do a
sense.
whole lot of advocating for that,
Mhm.
in part because the city of Prescott is our partner. They are our landlord here
Yeah.
at Watson Woods. And there are a lot of great voices in that conversation as well.
Okay.
So we focus a lot on the habitat,
Yeah.
this riparian habitat. There's another 50-cent word.
Mhm.
And so when we created this place, Watson Woods, a lot of people know it just as Watson Woods.
Mhm.
And we were having a conversation about what are we going to call it?
Yeah.
Watson Woods Preserve, Watson Woods Riparian Preserve.
Okay.
And, I remember arguing for, let's use the word riparian.
Mhm.
And other people who were part of that conversation said, nobody knows what that means.
Yeah.
You're just going to confuse everybody. And I said, maybe we'll educate them.
I was gonna say.
Oh,
Mhm.
riparian preserve, what does that mean?
Yep.
So let's do a show of hands. Who knows what riparian means?
I do not.
So riparian is having to do with the edge of the water.
Okay.
And so here in the Southwest, riparian areas, if you go up on the hillside and look down, you can see where the riparian areas are, because it's where we've got these
I was gonna say.
cottonwoods and
just-
willows.
Yep.
They're the bright green spots in sort of the taupe
Yeah.
environment that we
Definitely.
have throughout the rest of the world, or khaki maybe is a better
Mhm.
term. So back east, you still have riparian zones, but they're just not as distinct as
Because
they
it is
are
so
here.
wet. There's
Yeah,
so much water.
it's just in general it's a lot wetter in those environments. So these cottonwoods and willows, they need to be right here by the water, by the edge of the water.
Yeah.
And here at Watson Woods, we're kind of in the valley bottom. And cottonwoods and willows are what is known as riparian obligate species.
Okay.
So they're obligated to have their roots
Yeah.
in the water table.
Huh.
So that's why we
Yeah, and my
only
mind
find 'em
obviously
here.
just goes straight to Willow Lake.
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, that makes sense.
Absolutely. So at Willow Lake and Watson Lake, just downstream
Yep.
from us, we have all these cottonwood trees around the
Mhm.
edges, willow trees as well, and shrubs. But they're very unique habitats, and
Interesting.
we've lost most of what was here.
Okay.
So pre-Western settlement, the estimate is that there was, anywhere from 80 to 90% more than there is today.
Wow.
And
In terms of quantity?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, land
Yeah.
cover. So
Yep.
today, these riparian areas represent less than half of 1% of the total land cover here in the
Wow.
Southwest. And years ago, somebody started arguing with me about, well, it's really, you can't say 80%, it's really only 70%. And I started getting pulled into this argument, and I went, wait a minute. I was like, this is silly. It's a lot.
Yeah.
You know, it's a whole lot.
Yeah.
Let's not quibble over a couple of
Yeah.
percent.
Yep.
And so I think that, you know, a lot of the work of Prescott Creeks is just trying to help educate folks about why these areas are so special.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that they're so rare, right there is
In and
just
of itself,
inherently
yes.
kind of an important thing. They are where our water is. Back to that water conversation. So there's our interface with the water. And with our wildlife, birds in particular, about 75% of the wildlife in the Southwest are dependent for all of their life cycle or part of their life cycle on these healthy riparian systems.
Makes sense.
And so if these go away, we see fewer birds, fewer insects, fewer mammals. And so they're just really special places that unfortunately humans have not taken care of very well over time.
Yeah.
But they're super resilient. So one of the things I shared with
Gotcha.
you before we sat down was Watson Woods used to be a gravel mine.
You guys, listen to this. This is wild.
Yeah, it's and this is fairly recently. So as we were going about trying to figure out how do we help this landscape sort of become more productive than what it was prior to humans coming in and mining, we were trying to understand what was the history of the site.
Yeah.
Because we look around now and we see cottonwood trees. And 20 years ago,
I imagine if you took a poll, 1% of people would guess that it used to be a gravel pit. I mean, like, who doesn't look anything like a gravel pit?
and that's in part because nature has been doing its thing, and we have been trying to
So
help
you've
it.
been helping.
Yeah. You know, if we didn't do anything, it would eventually get there.
Yeah.
But we'd like
Speed it
to
up.
help it
and-
get there a
yeah,
little bit quicker because,
Makes sense.
you know, we as humans in the community benefit from that. We can do podcasts in shady, beautiful places
Yeah.
like this. We can go take our kids and
Yep.
look at birds or teach them about plants or a variety of different things. Healthy ecosystems like this help clean our water as it moves downstream. And that's an issue that Prescott grapples with. Granite Creek is polluted.
Okay.
The official term is impaired. Watson Lake is also listed
Okay.
as impaired. And so healthy areas like this, if we can filter that water as it moves downstream,
Filter.
that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it acts like a big sponge too. Holds a lot of water
But,
and releases
These things
it
need a lot
slowly.
of water.
They do. Cottonwoods use a lot of water, and that's some people criticize. Oh, you're planting cottonwoods. What are you, crazy? It's going to use up all the water. But the research is out there that's really showing that these healthy systems actually hold more water in the overall system through shading and bank storage and those sorts of things. So it's not just cottonwoods soaking it up and
Correct. Letting
releasing
go.
it to the atmosphere. It's
Yeah.
holding it in that whole system.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, it does, because you know, you come down here on a July day before the monsoons kick in, and over there in the sun, you're just hating life.
Oh, yes.
Step into the shade and you're happy
It's
as
perfect.
a clam.
Yeah.
And that's not just because of the shade, but because there's moisture. It's
Yeah.
humid in the air, and so we get that cooling effect on our skin,
Yep.
and all kinds of good things are happening.
Yeah.
So
Man.
I forget where we started here.
Yeah.
But
We're peeling back the onion of Prescott Creeks. Yeah, there's a lot there. What projects have you, let's talk projects.
sure.
What sort of things have you done in the past? What are you guys now doing? What would you like to do in the future? Or kind of, you know, where are needs
Yeah.
that you guys have met?
Well, at Watson Woods specifically, we've done a tremendous amount of work, you know, with these planting these cottonwoods. I think everything that we can probably see in the shot, we largely planted. The tall
Wow,
trees
okay.
back here, went in as actually a mitigation project
Okay.
when the city constructed Prescott Lakes Parkway.
Oh.
So when the preserve was created in 1995, so 25 years ago.
Yeah.
And let me kind of diverge
Yep.
from that. The city of Prescott owns the property.
Okay.
And Prescott Creeks holds a lease agreement to manage the property as Watson Woods Riparian Preserve.
Okay.
And so this year, 2020, not only is it our 30th birthday, but it's also our 25th anniversary here at Watson Woods.
Yeah.
And
Congratulations.
thank you. And that 25 years went really fast. I think when that lease was created, everybody said 25 years, that's
Yep.
great. We'll all be dead and gone.
Mm.
You know, who knows what will happen at that point. But that 25 years went so quickly. And as it was approaching, we were saying, oh my gosh, what happens at the end of 25 years?
Yeah.
And a lot of
Uncharted
folks in the community were asking that question too. So the really exciting news is that we just renewed our lease this summer
Okay.
with the city of Prescott for another 25
Wow.
years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And, you know, I'm tremendously excited that this area is going to continue to be Watson Woods
Yeah.
Riparian Preserve through at least 2045.
Wow.
And yeah, it kind of bends my brain to
Yeah.
to
I
say
just
that.
went down that same road.
I was talking to a lady at the trailhead and mentioned that to her the other day, and she said, "Oh, I'll be dead and gone by then."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, I might be
I don't
too,
think
but
I will, but
yeah,
Yeah.
who knows?"
Okay.
So yeah, it's I think kind of looking at that long-term perspective is one of the things that we've been focused on throughout. While we're doing our kind of individual projects, we really want this ecosystem to be something that's here for all time.
I was going to say, yeah.
So, not to be ungrateful and not to be
Of course
excited
not.
about our next 25 years, but as we embark on that next 25-year journey, we are planning for in perpetuity,
Okay.
forever.
I was going to say,
And
yeah,
so
roots that
Yeah.
they don't go away.
exactly, and so that when we are all dead and gone, that this area will continue to have the conservation values that it's got, all the things we've been talking about, for all time. Because I would love it if my grandchildren's
my
grandchildren can
Yeah.
come here and go, wow, look at these cottonwood trees. This place is amazing.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
Man,
It's kinda
another
cool.
25 years.
And when I got started, I was just trying to get my senior project out of the way.
No kidding, right?
But here I am.
Yeah.
It's kind of become an avocation.
I can tell.
Yeah. So projects.
Yeah.
So we've done a lot of things. I think we write our plans to kind of guide us so that we don't chase the shiny thing that continues to appear. And that kind of gives us something to measure against. Are we meeting the goals?
Absolutely.
Are there more cottonwood trees? Are they, are we seeing more wildlife? Those sorts of things.
Yeah.
So writing those plans, we developed a comprehensive plan. That was my senior project.
Okay.
First kind of written plan that said, here's what we're going to do. That went for about 25 years. Or I'm sorry, that went for about 5 years.
Okay.
And it took us about 10 years to implement it.
Yep.
And then we wrote the next plan.
Okay.
That was largely focused on how do we restore this area to what it may have been.
Yeah.
And so the tricky part with that restoration work was, what should it look like? Because it was a gravel mine, and it was cottonwood trees coming back from the gravel mine. So as we kind of tried to figure out what it should look like, one of the things that we came across was an aerial photograph
Okay.
from 1972, I think.
Okay.
And it was of a very large area. It had Watson Lake, it had Willow Lake,
Oh, yeah.
had what we now know as Prescott Lakes, the
Okay.
Prescott Lakes community
yep.
and the golf course and kind of the Cliff Rose neighborhood. And all that was just kind of ranch land at that point. But down in the bottom corner was this Watson Woods.
Yeah.
And you could see the gravel mining was active in 1972.
All right.
So it was interesting. The upstream half of the preserve looked a lot like it did today.
Okay.
A lot of cottonwood and willow
Yeah.
cover. The stream was basically where it was, where it is currently. But this downstream half, as it approaches Watson Lake, you couldn't find where Granite Creek flowed through.
Oh.
Just a whole bunch of little wet spots.
Yeah.
Where the mining,
Yep.
had kind of moved the
things
creek
around.
out of the way.
Yeah.
And so our presumption was that when the mining activity pulled out, they kind of connected those dots and said, okay, the water can get
Maybe.
through.
Yeah.
But, this stretch of creek, we actually realigned the creek right here.
Okay.
Because it was a little further over behind these tall cottonwoods. And it went straight down here and then made a hard 90-degree left-hand turn.
Okay.
And we know that in ecosystems like this, with this kind of substrate, sand and gravel, that water doesn't move that way.
Right.
It has more of a curve.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of our work with the stream channels here was trying to get them to function more naturally.
Okay.
And so bringing the stream over to
That's
the
so
right
cool.
and curving it around was part of it.
Yeah.
When we were doing the work, it was a lot of big yellow machines pushing a lot of dirt around. We had folks who came down here and said, "What are you guys doing?"
Yeah. Right.
We said,
Isn't this
we're fixing it? We're
Yeah.
restoring it.
Uh-huh.
And so it.
Well, it just doesn't even occur to the normal person. Wait,
Yeah.
we need to kind of redo the creek? No. Yeah, it was clearly, essentially demolished and maybe sort of put back, but not in a sense to where it's probably going to stay put. I mean, it was old gravel.
Right.
It's just going to go
Well,
wherever.
And it is gravel.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I think when the gravel operation moved out, they didn't have the functional aspects of the ecosystem in mind, other than, well, we know the water's got to get through.
Yeah, which is true.
And it was what we found as we were trying to understand what kind of shape the area was in. Looking at it, you could tell it was kind of beat down and it needed some help. So there had been about 20 years for cottonwoods to kind of start coming in on their own. And we did a lot of research, and part of what we do is we look for other areas that are in better condition. Can we use that as a reference for this site?
Yes.
Oh, well, we see cotton, this many cottonwoods and this species composition. And we had a really hard time. We couldn't find a good reference.
Interesting.
So this area, even in its degraded state,
Yeah.
even though when the gravel miners left, they didn't think ecologically, was the best habitat that we have at this elevation at this part of the state.
Okay.
So we're kind of giving it a nudge, trying to help it get there a little bit faster.
Okay.
So moving the channels was one big project that we did.
Yeah.
And planting vegetation on the banks. We used cottonwoods and willows to hold those banks together, rather than a lot of steel and concrete.
Yeah.
Because they're going to provide structural diversity. They will provide nesting habitat, nesting materials.
Yeah, exactly.
They'll help shade
They
the
check
ground.
off all the boxes.
Yeah.
Really, what is needed.
Lots of boxes.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it's interesting. We planned for maybe about 70% of what we planted to survive.
Okay.
And we monitored the project for about 5 years. And at the end of that monitoring period, the numbers showed that 95% of what we planted
Wonderful.
survived. Yeah, it's so good that it's actually problematic.
Okay.
Too dense.
You kind of plan on, yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. Do you think that speaks somewhat to your guys' ability and research to go, you know what, we really think that these are going to do well here, and then sure enough, things just, it's just kind of their habitat. Works well.
It's what I found with this, working with nature, it's often very hard to put our finger on the factor.
It's like the weatherman.
Exactly. Yeah, we get better over time. No, I'd love to say Prescott Creeks we're just such a crack operation.
You guys are good. Thank you.
No, I think what we had seen from other projects here, that we were averaging 80-85%.
Okay.
So, we tried to take a conservative approach and say, okay, well, 70%, but just 95% was unheard of. And I think there were multiple factors. I think we did our research, and we planted appropriate vegetation that should be here, and we put it in the right place. Some of the vegetation that we planted, we had irrigated, so we had city water with drip irrigation. We didn't see a big difference to, it was about half of what we planted was irrigated, half wasn't. Didn't see huge differences between those. But about 9 months after we did the project, we had the second largest flow on record come through here. So it was 6,300 cubic feet per second of water.
It sounds like that would be a disaster for what you guys just planted. What it would sound like.
It caused some problems. But it didn't wreck everything. And the way that we planned the project was we said, okay, we're going to set aside 40% of our budget to come back the second year and fine-tune things. We didn't think we'd be doing what we ended up doing, but I think we had really good moisture. Some of it scoured a few places out and caused some problems that way, but I think that year just was very wet, and that was very conducive to 95% of the vegetation surviving.
That's so neat.
It's a fun story to tell because everybody goes, oh my gosh, that's amazing. And it is, but it's so amazing that it's caused other challenges that we're slowly working through. You
would have been working through challenges at 70% or 90%.
Absolutely. So, and it's fun. I think, we really, the way that we manage this ecosystem is adaptively. So we're out here on a regular basis, kind of measuring things and seeing how they're doing, how things are changing. And so ideally we'll be able to kind of see how things are changing, and if it's not going the direction that we thought it was going to, we kind of nudge it back in the right way. And so, it's that adaptive strategy. We'll be doing that over the long term. And that's just part of it. And that's part of what makes it exciting for me.
I was going to say, it keeps every day a little different. That generalist role, in a sense.
Well, and it's fun for me because right after we do a project, I come out here and I'm looking at every tree and oh, this one's, not doing well, and look how great this one looks. And then we get busy with other projects over time. And I come back out and we look at it and we go, did we plant that? Or did it come in on its own? And that's my favorite part, is really where when we can't tell what we did and what nature's done. And that's the experience that I want folks to have when they come down here. It's just a forest.
That's what I thought it was.
Cool.
It's fun. I'll go back and tell my wife these things and, what?
So
that's really neat.
The guy who got me started doing this work, he had a video, and I've got the book. It's called The Man Who Planted Trees. And so it's kind of set, it's fictional in nature, but it's post-World War II in Europe. And basically the landscape was just obliterated.
Demolished.
And there's a gentleman, he'd been in the service, and he was, traveling, just backpacking through the wastelands, if you will. And he meets a shepherd who, as the flock is grazing, this guy's got acorns, and he basically is going around the hillsides planting these acorns. And he says to the guy, hey, who owns this land? And the shepherd says, I don't know. And so it was after World War I that he had this experience, and then he gets called off and he goes to World War II. And after the war, he comes back, finds the shepherd. He's working in a different area, but that previous area is this oak forest that's starting to grow up. And so long story short, the forestry division shows up and says, hey, we have to protect this forest. Nobody realizing this one guy.
Not previously a forest.
This one guy had created this forest. So,
interesting.
We're not quite operating at that scale, but I think conceptually, it's, we want to create this forest for the benefits that this forest will provide to the landscape, to the humans, to the wildlife, all those things.
That is so neat.
So The Man Who Planted Trees, and I can't remember the author, but it's
I love it.
a great story.
That is. Why do you do what you do?
For those kind of reasons, I
Yep.
think, for me, I get to come out here and be amazed just by nature.
Yep.
And so, earlier I said, well, I kind of get paid to splash around in the creek.
Yeah.
As the executive director, I spend a lot of time on the computer
Of
and the
course.
phone and in the office. But I think it's initially I got involved because I liked being out in the dirt.
Yes.
I liked having those aha moments every day,
Yep.
kind of being amazed by things. And I think being able to provide that to other people, I know when I bring my daughter out here, invariably every time we're out here, if we look closely enough, there's something that's just like, oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Maybe it's a butterfly chrysalis. Maybe it's seeing a bobcat go walking by.
Yep.
Maybe it's watching hawks,
Yeah.
dive for food and catch a rodent.
Yep.
All kinds of different stuff. When there's water, amazing things are happening in the water.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of fish in this water, but there are toads and there are
When we were out here a
insects and-
couple months ago, there were little toads everywhere.
Watch your step, because
Yes!
it feels like you're going to squish them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Uh-huh.
Those are I think those are the woodhouses toads.
Okay.
And so they kind of time that with the moisture. It was
Man.
maybe timed with that little tiny bit of moisture that we
Maybe.
had this summer.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a really, and it happens and it doesn't last very long at all.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. So, if other people can have that experience, I'm super excited about that.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what connects us all. It's,
Mm-hmm.
Prescott, here in Prescott, we have these creeks. Prescott is here because we have creeks. Prescott basically started just upstream at Fort Whipple.
Yeah.
And they built the fort there because they thought there would be enough water for the fort and the town that they knew was going to grow up. There hasn't been, but that's a whole other story. But we've got, depending on how you count them, we've got 8, 9, maybe 10 named creeks in the community. And historically, those creeks haven't been treated very well.
Makes sense.
And I think in today's age, where we're realizing that these natural resources are really important to us,
I was just gonna say
because
that.
there are water supply, there are timber, there are road material.
Yeah.
And so, I think humans in our lifestyle, when you ask kids, where does the water come from? A lot of them say out of the tap.
Exactly.
When I lift the handle, the water comes out. But it ultimately comes from
Yeah.
Granite Creek and Watson Lake, and not directly.
Of course.
But, so there's this disconnect.
Yeah.
And if we can reconnect by coming down here and having these
Yes.
experiences and reading the signs that kind of interpret that, I think we can all live on the land a little bit lighter.
Yeah.
And make wiser decisions about
I agree.
how long of a shower we take,
Yeah.
and whether we wash our car,
Yep.
what products we use,
Mm-hmm.
or do we really need a road over there?
Right.
Or is it okay to have it take 2 minutes longer
Yep.
to drive around
Mm-hmm.
and not have to go across the creek?
Yeah.
So I think, it's about making those connections.
Yes.
And, my daughter in kindergarten, that was a big thing, was, about making connections. Oh, well, we learned about this in school, and I see this over
Yeah.
here. So it's not just academic.
Of course not.
It's, can we make those connections and apply them to our day-to-day life?
Yeah.
That's my hope.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of trying to do our part
Good.
on helping people make those connections.
Yeah. Yeah, as you were sharing why you do what you do, one of the things that's come out of this podcast is being able to help other people do similar things, and simply helping people connect with that
Right.
brings me, I'll say it again, it brings me just as much happiness as I think I've ever experienced. And I kind of see that as part of who you are as well. Like, just knowing that the work you're doing allows people to connect is really like, okay, I did my job, guys. Like, there's just some. So
Yeah.
I'm excited to hear it. It's also been my experience as well, and
That's
it's
cool.
great.
Well,
Mhm.
yeah, I think that, especially in the last 6-9 months, as we've all been in COVID world,
Yeah.
everybody's being encouraged to kind of go in their box and not
Mhm.
interact. And so we're having to find new ways to do that.
Yeah.
And, I think with our work, with COVID, we have, pretty much ceased a lot of our volunteer operations.
Yeah.
So everything that we've done out here in the ground, on the ground, in the ground, all those sorts of things, all these trees, I say I planted those. But everything we've done, we have done with volunteer participation.
Wow.
So all these trees were planted by volunteers here in the community.
Good job, volunteers.
Thousands and thousands of hours
Oh.
and hundreds of thousands of dollars of value there.
Yes.
And we haven't been able to do that
Yeah.
this year, which has been really challenging for us. So having a venue like the Greater Prescott Podcast is hopefully a way to connect and help folks understand that, even though we're not out here turning dirt and planting trees this summer, the need is still there.
Yeah.
And, the work is still continuing. We have kind of focused on planning and some of that long-term protection that we've talked
Yep.
about. Trying to, once the world kind of snaps back
Yeah.
to where we can be out here with groups of folks doing that type of work, that we're ready to go and, have plenty of work to keep us busy.
Yeah.
So it's
That is
an
great to
interesting
hear.
time, an exciting time, but I think making those connections and working with the community, this is for the community.
Yes.
I like to refer to it as my office,
Yeah.
but it's everybody else's office.
I was going to say, it's mine too.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. It's well said. What is it about the Greater Prescott area that's kept you here?
Ooh, well, you can't beat the climate. And I think that, we have such a diversity of ecosystems right here. We've got pine forest, we've got the interior chaparral, we've got the grasslands.
Yeah.
It's not very long to get in the car and go up to alpine forest.
Nope.
It's so, for me, the natural world is kind of the connection.
Yeah.
And that diversity of experiences, and running throughout all of those, we have these beautiful riparian
Yes.
areas. So I think that's been a lot of it, is just physically. You can't.
And this is everywhere.
It really is. And so it's just, it's just a wonderful place. And I think, my work is immensely fulfilling. And I've got a pretty good gig. And you don't find this gig on every street corner.
I would agree. We'll keep it a secret.
Don't tell.
No, that's great.
So I think it's been that combination of things. I grew up in a metropolitan area that was, about 1 million people.
Okay.
So not Phoenix in size, but big city.
Absolutely.
I like the small townness of it. That's changing.
Yeah.
But, it's still got that small town feel in a lot of ways that I really appreciate.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Where did you grow up in Ohio?
Columbus.
Columbus. Okay.
Yeah.
It's that big of a city.
Possibly bigger now.
Yeah. I'm sure it's
Yeah.
quite a bit bigger.
But yeah, I think, the MSA, the Metropolitan Statistical Area with the suburbs and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Definitely
Well, heck, the
around
college
1 million.
alone is
Bigger than
I was gonna say
Prescott.
a tenth. Yeah.
Yeah.
10% of that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So, so it's, I don't know. It's been a good place. It's
Good.
been a good, I did not come here intending to stay here.
Right.
But I was 24 at that point, and
Yeah.
you can only
Nothing
see
else
so
better
far.
to do.
Yeah, I was just like, this seems like good for now.
Yeah.
And all these years later, here I still am. And,
Yeah.
I think it's this work and these kinds of things that have largely kept me here.
Great.
Yeah.
That's many of those reasons are what brought me here. So I also look forward to helping, in a sense, keep it this way. we're going to have some growth. There's no doubt about it. At the same time, I do think there are things that we can do to keep it more or less what it is now. And so I'm learning more about kind of how to be a part of that. I think at the end of the day, it's kind of my generation that's going to help carry that.
And our kids and all those sorts of things. It's interesting. There is growth. We are going to experience that everywhere, more or less. That happens, and so I think the challenge in front of us as a community is to have this ongoing conversation about why did we move here? Because so many of us have moved here from elsewhere.
Yeah.
So, I'm an import. I'm part of the problem.
Oh, a majority of people are.
One perspective. I think, I kind of see I get a pass on being part of the problem because of my day job. Maybe not. But I think the challenge is to have this ongoing conversation about what do we want this place to be? What do we value about Prescott?
Yeah.
And how do we retain those values while at the same time, having that reality of things are going to change over time. And so, our council members, our department heads, our elected officials, and our citizens need to be part of that.
I was going to say.
I can't tell you how often my phone rings and somebody goes, "Oh my gosh, can you believe what they're doing over here? What are you going to do to stop that?"
Yeah.
And it's like, at that point, it's too late.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's done.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10. Sometimes you can intervene and make a change for the good.
But in the big scheme, it's coming together and go. I mean, it reminds me of somewhat of what you guys set out to do 25 years ago. So we have this space. What do we want it to be, and what do we want it to look like in 25 years? And the conversation in the greater Prescott is very much the same.
Yeah. So, it's tricky, and it's moving out into the grasslands and those sorts of things. If we can be part of that conversation and lead by example, that's what I hope we can do for sure.
Okay. Now I'm going to make you really nervous, Michael. This is the rapid fire question section.
Ooh.
But you already know all the answers.
The tricky part's getting a short answer out of it.
That's the tricky one. Sorry. That's why I can edit things in post. So
there we go. Okay.
Don't worry. So just answer with what first comes to mind.
Okay.
First question. What's your favorite thing about Greater Prescott?
Watson Woods.
Duh. Why do I even ask? What's your favorite restaurant in Greater Prescott?
Ooh, I love the Maya.
I'm not familiar with that.
South Montezuma, right before you go over the hill. It is a little Mexican restaurant, family owned. It's been there as long as I have, longer. It's,
I drove by it today. I know exactly where you're.
Americanized, but still very authentic at the same time. Love it.
What's the number one thing on your Greater Prescott bucket list?
Bucket list. I would like to go. Well, I've never been to Mount Union.
Okay.
It's like right there. And I have only been to the top of Granite Mountain, like the tippy top, once. And it has been a very long time ago.
Okay.
And I've been thinking about that recently. Maybe it's time to go back up there.
There you go.
See the view. See how it's changed.
This one's always challenging.
Do it.
Well, what's your favorite all-time? I'm just not sure where to go with that. I know you like some birds, you like some trees, you like some stuff. So now I don't even know what to ask you for that one.
I'll make something up. Ask it.
Yeah. What's your favorite all-time something? That's what I'm not sure of. Kind of what, like. It's Eric. It's easy to ask Eric more, like, "Hey, what's your favorite bird?" Well, except he gives 15 birds, but
sure.
I just wasn't sure what to.
Okay, I'll tell you one of my all-time favorite plant at the moment.
Yeah.
If we could do that.
Yeah.
Is here at Watson Woods. It's a tree called southwestern cherry.
Okay.
I think there was some debate about what the common name was, but it's just there are very few of them here. And we've got one that's growing
Mm-hmm.
right on the edge of one of our trails.
Okay.
And as it has been growing up over the last couple of years, it's starting to crowd the trail.
Yep.
And as we've had some groups in working with us, I always point out, I say, don't touch this tree. And they look at me like, why? It's in the way. And I'm like, right.
I know, but
But we're going to move the trail when it gets so much in the
Gotcha.
way. We're not going to trim the tree. So it's, just I think maybe I like underdogs. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
There are just very few of them
Okay.
here in Watson Woods. And it came in on its own. We didn't plant it. So, yeah, when it gets that big, we're going to move the
Interesting.
trail.
I love it. At first, I thought you were going to say we're going to move the tree. I'm like, well, that's not going to work.
No.
The trail's a lot easier.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are 3 words to describe living in Greater Prescott?
Ooh, this year, dry. 3 words. Green, if you're here at Watson Woods, and quiet.
Okay. If you weren't the executive director of Prescott Creeks, what would you be doing?
Probably something very similar. I've often thought to myself, if I won the lottery, what would I go do? And I think I might do this.
I was going to say, you got a little extra money. You can do maybe a few other things in here.
Maybe Prescott Creeks would be a little better funded. Who knows? But I think that I've never really used this term, but I think it's kind of my dream job.
That's awesome.
That's
the best.
I sort of fell into it backwards, but
Good.
yeah, it's a good gig.
Good. Last question. What's your favorite summer activity in Greater Prescott?
I love to go hike downstream on the Verde River.
Okay.
In part because it's hard to get to,
No.
and it's very wild. But just the stuff you see and the amount of water that you have.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things.
Is that what flows through, what would it be, Cornville at some point?
So
the Verde
in
River?
Cornville, that's Oak Creek,
Oak Creek. That's
which is
what
a
I was.
tributary to the Verde.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
what I was thinking.
So the guy who got me started, his name is Eric Klomsky. He was the one who kind of did the heavy lifting and created the preserve.
Okay.
And Eric owns a business called Page Springs Cellars.
Okay.
Page Springs Winery and Cellars. So he makes wine now.
Yep.
And he's down there. He's got a beautiful spot.
Is he in Cornville?
He's in
Okay.
Cornville.
Yeah, there's
on Oak Creek.
2 or 3 or 5.
Yeah. He was
vineyards
he
down
was
there.
one of the early ones that got in before that whole
Okay.
scene started exploding.
Interesting.
But yeah, we've been working with him on he does a wine and music festival
Yeah.
at the end of June, the hottest
Okay.
part of the year. Crazy. We've been working with him on a silent auction at that event over the last handful of years.
Oh, neat.
So it's been real fun to work with him again
Yes.
and kind of get to be down there on the creek and
Yeah.
think about how all things connect.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
I named the podcast very specifically Greater Prescott Podcast. So I just went out to Arcasanti last week.
Right.
The point is, within an hour, you can get to a lot of really unique places. I really want to do one in one of those wineries. It's an hour away. It's a world's difference, and it's just so unique that in a day's drive, you could go have a wonderful little day over in Cornville. And
Absolutely.
I think that's another thing that makes our area just so unique.
It
are
really
things
is.
like that.
And if we can help you get connected, we know some of the folks over there.
Yeah.
I'd be more than happy to do that.
That'd be great.
And I'm guessing he'd probably get a kick out of it too.
Good.
So,
To wrap it up,
Yeah.
let everyone know how to get in touch with the organization, potentially how to volunteer and things like that.
Absolutely.
And then I will also include all the information when I put in the description.
perfect. Well, Prescott Creeks, I think, as all things are these days, you can find us on the web at prescottcreeks.org.
Okay.
So Prescott and Creeks is plural, .org. So we've got a lot of information there about
right.
our programs, our staff, our all-volunteer board of directors. There are forms for signing up as a volunteer.
Okay.
We are headed into the end of the year when we see a lot of influx with donations. So we've got a donate button. If folks are inclined to hit that, we can use all that support.
Great.
We're also on social media. You'll find us on Facebook, on Twitter. We're working to get our YouTube populated, and so maybe this will be something that ends up there. And then Instagram is kind of our newest social media channel as well.
Great.
So we're trying to get pictures of what's going on, and folks can learn all about us in those ways.
Yeah. It's clear that A, you have a passion, and B, you have a huge desire to continue to see this area what it once was, in a sense.
And what it can be.
Yeah. And to allow our children and our grandchildren the opportunity to use it. And I think that's really special. And I think I'm also getting into this, I'm not going on a tangent in terms of my interest, but we have a demographic of older people. So I'm always interested in getting them connected somehow, some way, so that they can get out and just get out. I think that's really important for, frankly, people my age as well. Sure. So I'm always looking for ways to encourage people to get out and volunteer. And I think this is just one of the many wonderful ways that people could do that.
Yeah, and we like to say we've had volunteers from age 2 to 102.
Exactly.
And so regardless of, folks' physical ability, those sorts of things, we've got database entry and, paper to push and those sorts of things, in addition to dirt to turn and trees to plant and all that kind of stuff. So, if folks are interested, we usually try to find a fit for everybody.
And I imagine you can. That's
typically, one of our big events is the Granite Creek cleanup, which we've been doing. This would have been year 14.
Oh, wow.
We had to cancel it because of COVID concerns. It happens the closest Saturday to Earth Day most years.
Okay.
So I want to say it was April 17th this year.
Okay.
I think it's April 17th next year.
Okay.
But we see about 500 people turn out.
Wow.
In that entire age range. Folks go out and they pick up trash for a couple of hours.
Okay.
Get a t-shirt, we give them a snack, they make a difference in the community.
Yes, absolutely.
And it's been a great event.
Aww.
So if nothing else, folks can come out, sign up for the cleanup. Doesn't cost anything. We have local businesses that sponsor us.
Support it.
Mandalay Homes was our big sponsor this year. It would have been their second year as well. So it's, we try to do a lot here in the community.
Anything else to share before we wrap it up?
I could talk all day and all night about Prescott Creeks, but thank you for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Again, I'll put in all the information, and as almost all my guests have shared, they're just huge resources and like to help people. So if there's anything that you guys need, I'll leave all the information. Reach out to them. They'll help you, and come enjoy it, frankly.
Absolutely.
If nothing else, get your tushy out here and go for a walk.
Yeah, we've got an entrance at Rosser Street and then one over at the Peavine Trail as well.
Yeah, I've done them both.
Cool.
It's great. Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
I genuinely appreciate it. I'm excited for people to learn more about you guys, what you do here, and if it fits for them, get involved, volunteer.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Then let's close it out. You guys, I really appreciate your time. Get out here, enjoy the beautiful weather, the beautiful scenery, and thank you very much for watching.
All right, thank you.